Welcome to the Shift Your Story, Change Your Life podcast. I'm Allie Rose, certified clinical hypnotherapist and subconscious success coach. I help my clients stop self-sabotage and feel safe to create more wealth, worth, and wellness from within. If you find yourself stuck repeating the same unhelpful patterns in your life, health, business, or relationships, even after all the mindset work, this podcast is for you. Each week, you'll hear deep dives into the hidden beliefs shaping your life and live hypno coaching sessions where someone shifts a block in real time. Because willpower isn't the problem, your subconscious story is. And when you shift it at the root, everything else begins to change. So let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to the Shift Your Story, Change Your Life podcast. Today, we're going to be kicking off a brand new series specifically on the subconscious blocks that hold high achievers back in business. But even if you're not in business, I promise you that you will still be able to gain a lot from these conversations, as we'll be talking about what these fears and blocks actually mean, where they typically come from, and how you can start to move through them. So today we're starting with a big one, which is fear of failure. If you've ever felt paralyzed by what if this doesn't work thoughts, this one's for you. But as always, before we dive in, Safiya, welcome back. How are you feeling about diving into this topic?
I'm feeling good about it. It's a topic that I feel like I've experienced it, and also I I've seen others experience it, and I have questions. So I can't wait to dive into the topic.
Right. I'm just waiting for one of these days when you're like, yeah, I don't really feel like diving into this topic today. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It may be a while before that happens, so don't hold your breath.
Oh
But
my
fear of failure. I think that's a good one. And as you said, it's a universal one. I can see how it would apply in business, but like I feel like I see people in any walk of life experience fear of failure. And so I think it'll be a very good topic for anyone who is
yeah,
tuning in.
absolutely.
So, as per usual, you know me, I love to start with a definition. How are we defining, or what are we saying fear of failure is? How would you define it?
So it's interesting. It's not just a fear of things not working out. I think it's a fear that if things don't work out, that it will confirm your worst internal fears that you're not cut out for this, that you're a fraud, or that you're somehow less than everyone else who that particular thing is working out for. Right. So that's how I would describe a fear of failure is that it's because we've all failed at some point in our lives and we've lived through that failure. But I think it's a fear, it's something that we internalize, is what I think
Mm,
is the big thing for me.
yeah. And one thing I will say about the sort of all failed in life, and of who knows what age of persons is listening to this, but I teach sort of university age students, some of whom I think have never failed at anything, or never related to it as a failure. So, something may happen and it may be someone else's fault or whatever. So they've not actually had anything that they've related to as a failure. And so when it happens, it can be quite difficult to cope with. But even me, who has experienced many failures in my life, I feel like I know I've lived through it, but it was so horrible. I don't want to live through it again. So I think there's a lot packed into failure, especially as you said, one that then leads you down the rabbit hole of you fail something and it means this and it means that and it means something about you personally, but it may also mean something about an outcome that you had linked to that. So I feel like failure always has a lot wrapped up in it.
Right. I mean, we always have the choice about whether or not we make something mean something about us or mean something about another person or an experience. And we are meaning making machines. That's where we have to look at how are we personally defining, failure in our lives? What do we want to make it mean about us? And when we can shift that, I think that that's really where, it becomes less scary to move through.
Yeah. And I definitely think failure is such a personal definition as well. If you're going through a long process, you might decide that you failed if you hit the first hurdle, or you might just decide it's just a hurdle. I'm going to move
Right.
through it. So I think a lot of it, as you said, it's going to be that internalized belief of what that failure actually is.
Right.
And what I find interesting about fear of failure is that it can show up in so many different ways. Like, I think sometimes when people think of fear, they think of like, you're like, I'm really scared, I'm terrified. But I
Right.
feel like fear of failure is one of those things that may sort of show up in different ways. Can you tell us some of the ways that fear of failure shows up, or how you've seen it show up?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is one of the biggest things that I work on with clients because fear of failure rarely shows up as I'm afraid I'll fail. Sometimes it is that direct, but instead, sometimes it shows up as endlessly tweaking your project, your program, your offer, spending weeks on the sales page but never launching it, or avoiding doing certain things because you're not sure that it's aligned, right? Or just needing to take one more course, one more certification before you feel totally qualified. And so those patterns make sense to me, right? Because if failure ever meant shame or rejection or punishment, your system will just bend over backwards to avoid any of that pain. And so that often looks like putting obstacles in the way of ever actually taking that step forward.
Mm. And what I'm hearing in that, as well as what you're saying, is perfectionism, right? This sort of like tweaking. Like, I know people who are like this, and they wouldn't call it fear of failure at all. It would be almost like, as you said, it's not ready, or I have high standards,
Right.
or whatever, which basically leads to it never actually going out, not being willing to do anything imperfect, when the truth is there's nothing perfect anyway. So
Right.
I
I've fallen
yeah,
into
that
that trap. Yeah, for
mhm.
sure. Have you fallen into that trap?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, I was chatting with someone the other day about perfectionism, and I would go as far to say there are things that I haven't even started
Right.
out of that fear, right? So it doesn't even look then like tweaking. It's almost like, I'm not gonna take that path at all, because of those sort of perfectionistic fears. I'm trying to think. So one example that I can think of, because obviously a lot of the work I've done is with people who would have written books, or wanting to write books, or wanting to write blogs, or whatever. And I know so many people that they they won't even start it, right? They're still stuck in research land.
Right.
Okay, I gotta research this, I've gotta research that. Oh, I don't know enough about this. Okay, I gotta go and research the 1950s of the blah blah blah. And it's almost like they never make it past that point. They never write anything, even though that's the thing that they say they want to do. And I know I've definitely fallen into that trap with things like that. Even though I have written things and I have put things out there, I've also fallen into that trap of, like, I think I mentioned this a few episodes ago, of having all these blog posts that I've written on my computer, not publishing them for no good reason at all. Although I
Right.
have published one recently, pleased to know. So, so yeah, I've definitely experienced it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can paralyze you, right? And so I think that we've all experienced probably that feeling of being paralyzed, right?
Definitely, definitely. And you talk about that feeling of being paralyzed, and it can actually feel like a real sounds it sounds awful, but it can feel like a real feeling, like a physical feeling. What's happening in the body and the nervous system when we are experiencing that fear?
Yeah. So, like I said about feeling paralyzed, the nervous system, when fear of failure gets triggered, I feel like the nervous system doesn't care about logic or strategy. It just cares about
Mhm,
survival. And your version of survival might be don't mess up, or don't be seen trying, or don't do anything unless you're absolutely 100% sure that it'll work. Right. So, what happens is that your body goes into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And so, freezing might look like not being able to make a decision, having total brain fog. Fawning might be over delivering or trying to earn. If I'm thinking about entrepreneurs or business owners that I've worked with, it's like trying to earn your rate that you've decided that you're going to set for your services. Flight might be jumping to the next idea or the next niche before this one has a chance to fully land. I know I'm guilty of that. I've fallen into that. And fight might be pushing harder, trying to outwork the fear. And that's because the body is literally trying to protect you from what it has decided is a threat, which is why I don't know that we hear it as much anymore, but that just do it advice rarely works is because your body is actually experiencing it as a threat, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I can definitely see that. I'm curious because earlier you said failure may be associated with shame. Can you say a bit more about that in terms of that shame factor?
I mean, sh I always say, guilt is external. Guilt is I did something wrong, right? And I feel a certain way about that. Whereas shame is much more internal, it's much more insidious, and it's often based on the belief that I am wrong. I am like inherently, internally flawed. Therefore, based on this belief, this shame feeling of I am flawed, of course, I am a failure, right? So fear of failure often like shame is just so, like I said, insidious, all encompassing. It can really feel like it consumes people. And so people will do anything to try to avoid feeling shame.
Mhm. Okay, I get that. And can you give us an example of a client story that might illustrate that? Because I'm sure you must have seen clients coming to you for various external reasons. I think this is what happens in business, right? You think, "Oh, it's a problem with my marketing or my messaging or whatever," and then it turns out to be this internal shift that's needed. So, have you got any examples of client stories that you could give?
Yeah, I think because it is universal, but sometimes sharing a story around it can really be helpful because we can often see ourselves in stories. And so
Mm.
one that comes to mind is a woman who had been sitting on a fully developed offer for over a year. I mean, everything was done, the sales page, the modules, the emails, but she could not bring herself to launch. She kept saying that she was waiting for the right time or to feel more in alignment. But when we worked together and when we dug deeper into the subconscious work and hypnotherapy, what came up that it wasn't timing, it was really this fear of failure. And specifically, it was a memory from when she was 11. She had auditioned for the lead in her school play and she was so excited. She was lit up, she was totally ready. But before her audition, I remember her telling me her dad warned her, "Don't get your hopes up." And then when she didn't get that part, he said this one line to her that I know, like, wrecked her. "Told you, that's what happens when you think you're better than everyone else." And that moment hit her so hard, and obviously, right, that's such a that's such a
What?
harsh thing for a parent to say, right? And it wasn't just because she didn't get the role, but because the disappointment was met with shaming by her
Mhm,
dad. So her subconscious formed a link between going after what she wants and being punished for going after what she wants. So wanting something too much means danger, right? Or trying too hard and not getting it, it's embarrassing. So years later, as an adult business owner, she's no longer 11 years old. Her nervous system was still running that same script that she created whenever she was 11 years old. So, fear of failure for her, right? It's protective. It protects her from experiencing the pain of that shame that she experienced when she was 11 years old. So,
mm.
I don't know. I hope that that makes sense. I hope that that paints a clear picture of how something like that is formed.
It definitely does, and it's bringing things to mind to me because, um I feel like it said she was going for this audition and she was obviously, as you said, shamed in that way. I hear so many stories of people also having, being shamed around something creative or, something that they've done in school years ago when they're younger, and then it carries through to adulthood. Do you find that that's often the case?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Someone asked me this. I did a master class. I was a guest in a mastermind the other day, and someone said, "Can one can one instance really
Mhm.
imprint that deeply?" And I was like, "Yeah, often that's all it takes is one memory to start the chain reaction of then seeing yourself through the lens of failure or that shame spiral." So I often find that we go back to 3 different scenes or 3 different memories in the work that I do with clients, but there's
Mhm.
often, like, one that really, like, kicks it off, and then that starts a spiral of seeing yourself through that same lens over and over again.
Wow, that's scary, I think, because it can happen so quickly and then take root so deeply. I think that's quite it's quite a surprise to me, actually.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
that's why I always tell parents to be mindful of what they're saying to their kids,
yeah.
because even if you're joking, it's more about
Mm,
how the child perceives what you're saying. Like, even if you're just kinda, like, kidding around and that kind of thing, and you know that you're joking, a child can really take that and internalize it and create an entire narrative that will shape the rest of their life based on that thing. Obviously, parents aren't perfect, but I do think in being mindful and being intentional about what you're saying to your kids.
yeah, and that's fair enough. So you gave that example of your client. What are some other early messages that you have found people associate failure with danger or like, the nervous system interpreting this thing as physical danger?
So, most of us didn't wake up one day with a fear of failure, right? Like I said, we learned it sometimes explicitly in what someone said to us as a child, and sometimes in ways that we didn't realize. So maybe thinking getting punished for a bad grade instead of being supported, being
Mm,
praised only when we're perfect or productive, being
mm,
the responsible one who wasn't allowed to mess up, or maybe being laughed at for trying and not winning, or being told you're too sensitive when failing, or when you lost at something, when that actually hurt, being told you're too sensitive. Early moments like that teach the subconscious mind that making mistakes aren't safe, that failing means I will lose love or safety or belonging. And so as adults, again, the brain, the mind wants to move us away from anything that isn't safe. And so if failing isn't safe or it isn't met in a way that is safe, as adults, we avoid failure because it'll feel like rejection, abandonment, shame, or loss, right?
yeah. One thing I wondered, obviously you talk about that explicit or implicit messaging, and I'm thinking about what if what if there was a high stakes failure for somebody when they're quite young? Like if they failed at something and it wasn't someone explicitly saying you were bad or whatever for failing it, but feeling like if I hadn't done this, then this bad thing wouldn't have happened. So almost like something that might have happened anyway.
Mm.
I I'm trying to think of how best to describe this. So yeah, something that might have happened. Like I remember my nephew was little. He dropped this bowl on
Mm.
the ground,
Mhm.
and it like a big bowl, and it broke. And somebody stepped on the glass, and I think he internalized that like
Mm.
he shouldn't have dropped that bowl. Nobody said that to him. We were all very sympathetic with him because it was an accident, but it was just like his how he interpreted that. As, like, he can't do anything right because he's dropped this ball now and now it hurts somebody else and all of that. So it's something that's happened that feels high stakes even if no one's actually responded negatively to it.
Right, absolutely. And I think that that is that internal, that's where that, like, shaming starts to happen because we are often our own worst critics. And so I just think that that's a perfect example of how something can take root even though no one said anything to him about that. It's an internal story. And so it's just so interesting to me because that's what it is. He created a story or I don't actually know. Did this actually happen?
This did actually happen. He's better about it now, but it's hard to know. I mean, he hasn't grown up yet, so I hope he doesn't grow up to feel upset about it. But I was just using it as an example of someone developing that in a narrative because I know after he had done that for a while, he was very much hard on himself for
Right.
doing it. And though we were like, "Listen, don't even worry about it. It happens. It happens to everyone." But I think he it hit him hard and he was young, right? So I was just wondering if something like that, but maybe more serious, could impact somebody even if no one said anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that the beautiful thing that you just described, though, so even if he's creating these internal stories about himself and like making that mistake and that that's not safe, he has the corrective experience of the people around him saying, oh, no, like it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Right. And so that helps to take some of the sting of internal away. But people don't always get that. People don't always have the corrective experience of people in their lives being like, "Oh, that's so it's totally fine. It's okay." Right? And so that's really where something can take root more deeply, the story that you start to tell about yourself around
Mhm.
being a failure or making mistakes.
Okay, understood. And what does it take then to rewire this as an adult?
Yeah, I mean, people are probably gonna be so tired of hearing me say this, but it starts with awareness. You have to name the pattern, right? You can't
Mhm,
fix something that you're not fully aware of. And so naming those patterns that you find, which means that you have to kind of stop and take stock of your life. You have to say, okay, if there's this thing that I've been trying to do, if there's an offer or service that I've been wanting to launch, but I continually find myself stalling or getting almost there, I have to stop and take a good look at, is it actually because of whatever things I'm saying it's because of? Or am I avoiding this launch because I'm afraid of what failure might mean about me? If I fail, then that would mean X, Y, or Z, right? And so getting honest with ourselves is the first step. It breaks that loop. It breaks the loop of us saying, "Oh, it's about this isn't perfect enough yet. It's about this, Y, and Z." It's about just taking that look and being like, if I'm really honest with myself, I'm afraid that I'm going to fail. I'm afraid that this is going to flop. And from that point, then you can start to make shifts and changes, right?
mhm, yeah. I think that's such a good point because as you said earlier, it doesn't always look the same, or it may not feel like how you expect fear to feel. It
Right.
may very well be like, "But it's not ready," or "I'm not in alignment," and as you said, if you see that pattern then repeating itself, then it's time to ask yourself, "Okay, what else could it be?" Right?
Right.
Um, I think that's really good. And so, I know that you've worked with your hypnotherapy clients around this. And I know you said that sometimes one sort of incident can start to take root. You may reveal that during the hypnotherapy. Is that enough usually to kind of undo this pattern?
So the way that it would work is we would identify, the memory, the root of it, and then we would talk with the part that has created this fear of failure. And then I always have people identify one small step that they can take outside of our session that is going to start to move them through the fear. So for
Mhm,
this, it might look like, just starting by taking any action that's a little bit outside your comfort zone, like not so big that it shuts you down. I always say the key is to stretch, not snap.
mm,
And so if we're thinking about, we've been kind of focusing on business owners, it might look like recording a voice note, sharing your offer, and it's just for yourself. You're just saying it out loud and you're just getting used to saying it out loud, right? or sending one DM to someone who's shown interest, or even saying your pricing out loud if your voice, because if you have to make yourself feel more comfortable with that, or this might resonate for you, but publishing a messy post without over editing it and just getting it out there, right? And then
Yeah.
Right. And then the key is to stay with yourself afterward. The key is to notice what thoughts, body sensations, or fears come up, because most people think that success means never feeling fear, but I really believe that the real work is learning how to feel safe within your system when you are actually feeling fear. And then when fear shows up, meeting it with curiosity and compassion instead of shame.
Yeah. I definitely would agree with that. I think even I always thought that, like, people who were out there doing things I wasn't doing weren't having the feelings that I was having,
Mm,
right? But actually, they're having those feelings and they are able to stay with themselves, as you say,
right.
throughout it. But also, I'm hearing that word that you use a few times, safety, right? And I think I often think of that, like, years ago when I first started my blog, I joined a group of other people who had just started their blogs. We just share things to each other. And the
Right.
thing I liked to that space was that it was a safe space. Nobody, like, we had agreed, no one's gonna say, "That's terrible," or whatever it was that we thought people would say. And it was like you could take that small step outside your comfort zone in a space that has already agreed to be a safe space.
Right.
But it sounds to me like you would go even before that, start to create that safety within yourself, and then maybe have that safe space, like you said, that voice note that you've left with yourself, or maybe share it with a friend, or that all that, being a safe space as well.
Right, absolutely. Here's the harsh reality is that I have found that some people don't even feel safe enough to write down what they want.
Hmm.
That alone, right, that alone can bring up a lot of fear because then it makes it real. Or to even say it out loud, that makes
Mm.
it real that they actually want this thing. And then creeps in, what if I fail? Or what if this doesn't work? So people don't even voice their thoughts out loud, their desires out loud. I often say to people, "It's just you and me here. You don't have to do anything with this. You don't have to do anything about this, but let's just put it out there." Right? If you could name what you actually want, if you could name what you wanna go after, what is it? Right?
Yeah, yeah. I I wrote about this years ago because I have this client who I one day I penned her, "Ask for what you want Wednesday," because she's very good at asking for what she wants.
Right.
And I decided I was gonna try it, and I was like, "Sometimes the person you have to ask for permission is yourself." Like,
Right.
sometimes that is actually where it starts. You want something, and you have to give yourself permission to want it. You think that you want permission from someone else to do it, when actually it starts with giving yourself permission to even want things. There was a there was a book that my sister and I read years ago, which was a book about starting your own business, etcetera, and one of the things that I wish I could remember which book it was, but one of the things that there was an exercise in the book about writing down what you want, like writing down your goals. And I remember someone saying to my sister, I think it was, saying to me, like, as soon as she went to write it down, in her brain, there were all these reasons why she couldn't do it, and she couldn't even write it down then. And so, yeah, I can definitely resonate with that idea of not even wanting to say it out loud or put it out into the world because of those fears that are coming up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm curious because I remember years ago hearing someone say that, there could be fear of failure, but there could also be a fear of success. So, what's the difference between those two, I suppose, in theory, but also how it may show up?
Yeah, I mean, this is such a good question because I feel they can look really similar. Often say, they're sisters or they're neighbors. They live in the same neighborhood, and we'll also be diving into the fear of success in our next conversation. But the distinction
Ah,
The distinction is that fear of failure sounds like if I try and it doesn't work, I'll feel ashamed or exposed or not good enough. Whereas fear of success sounds more like if I try and it does work, I won't be able to hold it. I'll still end up hurt or overwhelmed in some way. Like I won't be safe in some way. So the clue is in
Mm,
your thoughts after you imagine taking the leap. So if you think like, what if no one signs up? It's probably fear of failure. If you think, what if people sign up and I can't keep up? Or what if I lose control or friends or freedom?
mhm.
Probably dealing with a fear of success. So does that help make the distinction?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, that same idea of safety keeps coming up. Like, either you feel like you're not safe because you failed, or you feel as if actually doing the thing exposes you in a way that then you're not safe either. So, yeah, I can definitely see that. Oh, that's gonna be a good conversation. I look forward to that one, having that one
Uh,
next time.
yeah,
Okay,
because
that's great.
it's so
Mhm,
interesting because in a way, they are so tied because there's still this little whinge. It's like you get the success and then it's like you bounce back to feeling like you might fail once you get the success. So it's like you're afraid of the success.
yeah. And the outcome kind of looks the same, right? If someone's trying to launch an offer or put something out into the world, maybe even start doing some marketing content, or as you say, saying their prices out loud. If someone's actually start wanting to do those things and they're not doing it,
Mhm.
the outcome looks pretty similar. So I guess that's where I think would be an advantage to working with someone like yourself, start to tease out those nuances of like, what is it that you're really afraid of?
Right.
Because that can then lead to that ability to take those steps to put it out there.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's really what we do is we get to that root of, like, what is the actual fear, because it's often not of failure or success. There's something that is more deeply rooted that is kind of propping up those fears, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's great. And the reason I think it's great is because I feel like when I started writing and publishing my blogs, I felt like I was able to overcome those fears. But then as soon as I went to move to like a different task, I felt like I was then back at square one again. Whereas the advantage I think of getting to the root of the problem is that that can then allow you to do any number of things, which is true if you're running a business. There's going to be lots of things to do, right? There may be you know, running a workshop, it may be putting an offer out there, it may be having a sales call, maybe writing content. There's a variety of things that you may have to do. But getting to the root of it may help with all of those things.
Right, absolutely. That's why you want to get to the root of something so that because it impacts I always say the root affects the fruit, right? So you have to figure that out first because a lot of times people are troubleshooting symptoms or the fruit and they're
Mhm.
not getting to the root of things. And so they just find themselves kind of repeating the same patterns over and over again. Right.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, well that's really good. I'm actually looking forward to the rest of this series. This is going to be really good. Maybe I'll start my business when we're done, Ali. I'll restart my business, I should say, when we're done.
Yeah, I would love that. I would love if this series helps you do that. So, yeah, wonderful. All right. Well, before we go, if you saw yourself in this episode, I want to invite you to head to theallyrose.co or click the link in the show notes to take the quiz and discover your dominant subconscious business block. You'll also get a blueprint that will walk you step by step through the process to begin shifting it. And if fear of failure has been keeping you small, I promise you that there's a safer, more powerful way forward. I hope that this episode was helpful. Thank you so much for joining us, and we're sending you so much love and gratitude. Until next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of the Shift Your Story, Change Your Life podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, I'd love to hear about it. Feel free to send me a message on social media. I'm at the Ali Rose on both Facebook and Instagram. And if you want to be coached on a future episode or explore what it would look like to work with me one-on-one, head over to shiftyourstorypodcast.com. And if you never want to miss an episode, make sure to subscribe and leave a rating and review. It helps more people find this work. Until next time, keep shifting, keep growing, and most importantly, I want you to remember that your story isn't set in stone. You always have the power to shift it.